Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA Civic, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 10 a.m. We got a great show lined up for you today. Now, whether you're wondering if you are in the right career, looking to change job roles, or trying to reduce conflict and improve relationships at work and at home, you must begin by fully understanding your own interest and needs and how they drive your ultimate happiness, as well as unleash your stress points. Used by millions of people worldwide, the Birkman Method is the only personality assessment tool that reaches beyond self-described behavior and situational analysis to unravel the DNA underpinning workplace satisfaction and productivity. The Birkman Method, your personality at work. We are having on the show today author and guest Sharon Birkman Fink, who is part of the Birkman Method, who will kind of do a deep dive into this, what's been human resources tool, but also a very good way to get to learn other people's personalities. So please stay tuned. Keep listening. If you are a long-time listener, you know we always use the first few minutes of the show to tell you a little bit about what we do or what's going on in the Houston and Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. So we do have a talk coming up here on the 26th, so July 26th. This is going to be open to Harris County employees. So a lot of times when we go out and do financial literacy talks, these are going to be, they're always free to the public. There's never a charge, but they're usually going to be open. This is only open to Harris County employees, but if you are a Harris County employee, this is going to be 7/26 from noon to 1, and we're going to be discussing student loan repayment strategies. So this is going to be a good one. We're going to talk about goals, how to adopt a debt repayment mindset of paying your student loans off as quickly as possible. Look at some kind of creative strategies on maybe consolidation, looking at forbearance, deferral, if that's an issue for you. Some of the differences between private loans, federal loans, and what is going on in the student loan space. And this is topical right now because it is one of the things that possibly is affected by interest rate hikes. You know, we've had this year interest rate hike. In the past, these have been slow in the last 10 years, and now we're seeing those interest rate hikes going up. So things that are sensitive to interest rate hikes, student loans. If you have an adjustable rate mortgage, those are tied to prime rate, which is also tied to that interest rate rise that we're seeing. Anything that's got an adjustable rate, that's the negative side. The positive side, it could make your money market or your interest rates on the checking accounts and savings account go up slowly but surely, eventually down the road, if we see more of those. So keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to the interest rate hikes, and all of that does tie back into your student loans and that sort of thing. So with that, let's go ahead and get Sharon on the line here. Sharon, are you here?
I am here.
Excellent. Thank you.
And happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure, Chris.
Now, I always kind of start the show the same way. I like to share your bio with listeners. Now, but are you here in Houston as well?
We are. In fact, we're right across we're right by Williams Tower, just next door to the Galleria.
Yeah.
Right off 610.
Well, my old office was right there on Yorktown, and I just moved about two months ago, but we're still neighbors. I'm on Richmond, so I'm not that far away.
You're a neighbor. By Houston terms, you're really close.
Absolutely. Well, let me share your bio with listeners so they can get to know you just a little bit better. You are the president and CEO of Birkman International since 2002. You originally trained as a singer, musician. You were a National Merit Scholar and Woodrow Wilson Fellow who completed a master's degree in music at the University of Texas. And you've asserted that any child raised in a family business is always a part of the business.
Yes.
And this makes your Birkman tenure very long indeed.
Well, yeah, Chris, I'm actually a poster child for encore careers, having more than one career in your lifetime. I was familiar with the business, having just grown up in it. It's as you said, it's hard not to be familiar. But I'm like a lot of teenagers. I was going to follow my own path, and in psychology, working with people in business is what my parents did. So it was actually in my late 40s, in 2000, that I decided I best learn something about the family business because my parents were aging, and people were concerned about a succession plan. So I started working when my youngest daughter was in second grade and going to school most of the day, and discovered that I really enjoyed it. And it was within a couple of years, my father decided it would be okay to let me kind of put my training on warp speed and learn leadership. So that's when, in 2002, I took on the role of president and CEO, and really it's been an really exciting second chapter for me in my career.
Well, absolutely. And you talk about encore careers. That's something we talk about quite a bit on this show, but this is a definitely, let's dive right into it. For listeners who aren't aware, what is the Birkman Method and how is it different from other personality tests?
It is, the original name that my father gave to it was a test of social comprehension. So it's really at core, it's about understanding relationships, and that starts with self-awareness, a really good, accurate understanding of one's own strengths and how we do quality self-care so that we can be the best we can be at home and at work. So that is part of it. Then the other part of it is really deepening our understanding of the strengths and how the people we work with can be most effective and stay, to be in stress sometimes is perfectly human, and we all have it. It's normal. But Birkman identifies what our stressors look like. I call that like the red light on the dashboard when you're driving the car. Normally, you drive along, and until you see a warning light, you're fine, but once you see that stressor or that warning light, that's an indicator of, that's what it looks like for me when I'm in stress. Now I need to do some self-care so that I can continue to be productive with the people that I live and work with.
I'm sure I'm 43, I'm an independent business owner now, but over the course of my lifetime, the different jobs that I have had, I have taken the Birkman Method test, I want to say multiple times, so people might have taken it and not even realize that they were taking it. It's really widely known. You talked about kind of identifying your own strengths, identifying those stressors. Why do we need to identify our underlying needs? Are there consequences when they are not met?
That's an excellent question. Most personality tests out there, and there's lots of very reputable ones, they will do a good job of telling people how they self-identify, how they show up at their most effective. What we say, the differentiator for us is that we say, and you can have underlying needs that are harder to see, harder to articulate, but critically important to your success. So what I mean by that, if you think about a tree, we can tell if it's an oak or a pine by just looking at it from the ground up. What we can't see and what's keeping that tree anchored and alive is its root system. So what Birkman does is we ask questions about what you're interested in terms of jobs, which give us those vital areas of interest that are big engagement and motivators in the workplace. Then we ask questions about how do you see yourself, and we ask you questions about how do you expect other people in the world to be. And from that three-dimensional view, we get a really nuanced profile, if you will, of how people can really identify their strengths and see that not everybody recharges the same way. And again, to use a natural example, if I have two plants and one needs dry soil and one needs a lot of water, I just need to be able to know which is which. Human beings have these underlying needs that Birkman identifies can be polar opposite for two employees. And if you always go by, I'm going to treat people by what I need, then you may completely miss the mark and accidentally, with the best of intentions, put your coworker in stress. Or vice versa. So we feel like it's really powerful when people have a way to see that clearly and talk about it.
So I know we've talked about kind of on the individual side of kind of those strengths, but from a team perspective, can the Birkman method show teams how to work together more effectively?
That's one of the main things we do, in fact. When we're not helping people career path or select the right career, that one of the biggest ways that Birkman is applied is putting good teams together or helping teams that are already intact learn how they can really hone in on how they can be even more effective and work together with even more intelligence and more success. And avoid some of the natural conflicts. What we see so often is we work in companies of any size. Anywhere you got people, we can be helpful. What we see is that I would say 99.9% of the time, people are trying their best. Nobody sets out in the morning to make a mistake in relationships. But so most of the time, or very often, the struggles, the conflicts we have are simply because, like I say, these needs are hard to see. But if you have a way to bring them out and talk about them non-judgmentally and try to avoid some of that natural defensiveness we can have, then we see people just start to blossom. So I would say our top applications are careers, executive coaching, leadership, that is, and teams.
So that makes perfect sense to me. That it kind of plugs into any size company. In my head, for some reason, I'm thinking these large to medium-sized companies, but we have a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and even small business owners where maybe their team is a team of two or a team of three.
Yes.
Can you kind of help paint a picture for those people how this might help?
Absolutely. I love entrepreneurial startups. That's really one of the things I'm most intrigued by. What we see out there is the key to an entrepreneurial startup being successful is for the person who's the entrepreneur to be able to draw and assemble around him or her the right kind of talent to make it happen. Because the reality is that nobody, not even Steve Jobs, could do it without Steve Wozniak. You've got to have a diversity of talent. Generally, we see four types in most teams, like 4 points on a compass. You have to have the people that have the vision, the people that can sell, the people that can build and create in a technical way, and the people that can take care of the system, that are good at numbers and systems and process. And if you don't have some of each of those kinds of talents, you're not going to be successful over time with your company.
I love that. So that was a lot of stuff you just said. I'm kind of taking notes here as far as so I drew a little compass here with vision, sales, building the tech side of it, and then being able to serve the systems and the
financial acumen, to keep it running smoothly.
And
pay your taxes and your bills.
Absolutely. So I want to pivot just a little bit because that goes into one of the things that you just alluded to there is when it comes to leadership. What do you think some of the biggest roadblocks for somebody who is a leader in a company that you've seen out there?
Well, I'm going to hark back to something I just was mentioning, and that is if I don't have the wisdom to really know where I'm strong and where I need help, then I'm going to be in trouble. So again, if I can say I'm really, for me, I'm not so good on the numbers and the financial side. So it's critically important for me to identify someone that is totally trustworthy and very talented, and as my VP of Finance says, gets jazzed up by closing the books and by numbers. She doesn't close anymore, but she hired the right person to do that. Again, so it's knowing that you've got to hire for your complement.
So that word complement is very strong there, because no person is all things, and so
that's right.
Pushing that ego aside and figuring out where your gaps are at, where your weaknesses are at, and filling those in. This seems like a really good tool for that. Along the same lines, when we talk about leadership, I know you guys have on the website have talked a little bit about generational differences. Now, I know we've talked about personality here, but where does the generational differences play into this?
I'm going to ask you to hold that question just for a second.
Sure.
When I mentioned complementary differences, one of the most common mistakes that an entrepreneur or a leader can make, because it's so easy to fall into this trap, and that's to hire people that are just like you. True story, I was at Harvard in 2007. We were doing a session with Birkman, and a successful California software company guy came over and he said, "Sharon, I know the mistake I made. I hired 15 talented engineers, but they're all just like me." But to your question about generational differences, we actually are until my father lived to be 95, the founder and creator of the Birkman Method, and only passed away in 2014. So for quite a few years, we have 3 generations working here, me being the second, and then I've got my daughter Amy, who's in her mid-30s now, and she's developing in a very strong way to take the reins next. So we see certain aspects of the millennial thinking, which I think is mostly cultural. What's interesting, there are definite differences in terms of how they see the importance, which is, I think, good, of work-life balance. And they kind of learn that over time, the kind of boomer mentality of we're going to take care of you and give you a gold watch and an annuity and keep you for 30 years. 40 or 50 years, that's not really true anymore. So I think that's fed into some changes. In terms of the Birkman, however, in terms of personalities, surprisingly, we see that the deeper you drill down into temperament, traits, and interests and personality, we're not seeing a dramatic difference, which is kind of fascinating.
So that just goes back to the core that how important the personality side of it is, no matter what the cultural differences are there.
Exactly, because the cultural differences are a product of the times, and so we call that learned behavior. What Birkman is measuring is more intrinsic. We think that babies are born with their own personality DNA, and if you've ever been a parent or a grandparent, you know that. There's certain things you can shape in a meaningful way, and you must. But there's a certain kind of personality traits that come with birth, and I think that's actually for a very important reason. The reason is because society as we know it, the world civilization needs this kind of diversity that we've been talking about at the core. If we didn't have people that like different things, some like numbers, some like technology, some like ideas and being creative, if we didn't have that diversity born into us, we'd be in trouble as a society.
I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned before we transition to this question, but you said don't hire people just like you. I can imagine how frustrating that's got to be if you have a weakness or a gap there and you've got 15 other clones or copies of yourself. It's just a compound effect there on that. Well, so let's talk a little bit about some stories that do you have any stories or real life examples where people have, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're medium, large size companies, where they've taken the Birkman personality test and had success with it? What has it led to?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm at liberty to mention, because he's given me permission. One of a real success story for us is a company out in the Sugar Land area called Southwest Electronics. And they were a startup that started making lithium batteries and got very successful because these are the important batteries used in oil wells. And in fact, if they'd had one of these, they probably could have prevented the Deepwater crisis. But that said, the CEO of that company was a good friend of my dad's, and he used Birkman to, when he was looking at putting exactly the right leadership team together, he looked at the traits he needed, and then rather than, he kind of hired blindly because he made a choice looking only at data, and chose a lady in the company that probably would not have been an obvious choice, but based on what he saw, he made a very informed decision, and that was like 15, 20 years ago. It's worked out beautifully. The company is thriving and soaring, and I think that approach to say don't do it by always just by the obvious. Look at the data and see who actually has the qualifications in terms of what motivates them, their temperament, that those executive decisions can make and break companies.
What other things do you see people doing wrong out there? One of the things you mentioned earlier was hiring people just like you, so that's not good. But what other things do you see people doing wrong in reference to the personality test?
I think sometimes people that interview really, really well, if you don't have, again, this sort of background intelligence. Now, we never recommend that you hire only on a Birkman. You know, obviously you need to look at everything else, the resume, the interview process. But the point I would make is that many times someone may not be the most splashy, outstanding interviewee, but that, in fact, is exactly the person you need.
That makes a lot of sense, and this is part of I would think if you're in HR and you're doing your background, you look at the credit, you look at background test, and this is just a separate section. You called it background intelligence, but it's really doing your due diligence on the person. It's doing your due diligence on that fit. You can do as much as you can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But anything that you can do that's going to load the deck in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. Because people are complicated, and even when you do it all correctly, the reality is that we can tell if people are going to be interested or stressed. We can describe what that's likely to look like. At the end of the day, though, human beings have free will, and they make choices day in and day out. So what we can't do is say for sure, like, let me give you an example. A person who's really talented at numbers can be the best CFO on the planet, or they've got the skill set, should they turn to the dark side, to be an embezzler, a con artist. Yes. But you have to have that talent in the first place. At the end of the day, Birkman can say how they'll be successful, but not ultimately what character they have and what choices they're going to make.
Absolutely. We don't have a crystal ball. We can do the best we can. But
exactly.
I did a show maybe about a month ago on corporate embezzlement and fraud, so that those people are just as smart. It's like you hope you don't get them, but you do as much as you can to stack the deck in your favor of getting the right relationship in there. So how about somebody who is, when we talk about the entrepreneurial startups, what if you have no employees? What if it's just one person? You talked a little bit about career or corporate coaching. How would something like this help that person?
A person who's an independent coach, you mean?
Yes.
One of the things that we do is, Birkman really does two things for our business model. We make and sell the Birkman assessment and different reports that support that. We also, our secondary endeavor, if you will, is that we offer training on how to effectively use this information. So a large number of the people we work with are just what you said, independent coaches. They come, they get certified. Many are certified in multiple assessments and in other leadership products, but they add the Birkman to their toolkit, and then they go out and they work with companies around Houston or actually across the globe, because we're in 23 languages now. And so we are living up to our reputation as Birkman International. And it's really fun because, you have a chance to see these different cultures. But these solo practitioners oftentimes are the people that are brought in to be the objective executive coach or work with an intact team or help with some important hiring decisions or succession planning is an important thing that they help with. So they're self-employed, and they go from company to company. And you have to be a knowledge expert and a pretty independent sort of individual. But the ones who do it and do it well they make a lot of money, and they seem really happy doing it.
So this seems like, and this is, as a former trainer, corporate trainer, this is one of the spaces that I live in now that when I go out and I do talks, I'm doing it on the financial literacy side, but I'm very HR Houston, a lot of the coaches. So I'm on the website here. I'm looking at the certification program for Birkman. That sounds like a great tool for somebody who is a trainer or a coach or a corporate coach, executive coach, to add to their toolbox there to be able to go out and talk about that. So that's something neat. And you're here in Houston, HR Houston, but my listeners are international as well. And there is the international aspect. What's the furthest you've seen people? What country or company have you seen outside of the U.S. where they've adopted some of these ideas?
Well, South Korea is going gangbusters with the Birkman. Also, Dubai and Saudi Arabia. And that was hard because Arabic is not an easy language for IT in that it's written from right to left. It was one of the more recent ones we've done, and it was very difficult. But now that they've figured out how to do that, I guess we could do Hebrew as well. We just
absolutely.
They would like that in Israel. But let's see, we're pretty big in Australia, Singapore, and so those are pretty far away.
Absolutely. So that goes back to when we were talking earlier about these core ideas being kind of universal, that it's going outside of the social, millennial, the age, and all of the. We've got people in South Korea, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Singapore,
South Africa is another one. We're working in Johannesburg.
Those are examples of places where these principles are working. So fantastic. Well, we're bumping towards the end of the show here. That was a quick 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I have forgot to ask you that you would like to tell our listeners about today?
I would. I think one of the things that helped me as a person that was shifting careers at midlife is I had to get on. I love to learn and I love to read, but I needed a fast track to help me feel confident. So I did join every executive group from Greater Houston Partnership, CEO Roundtable, Vistage, and then about 6 years ago, the Women Presidents Organization, which is all female leaders, formed a new chapter here in Houston. And that has been an enormous support group for me and a big help because I can meet once a month with women who are in different industries and see a lot of our challenges are common, but we have a commonality of facing similar issues within the company of all kinds. But it's a real confidence builder to have that kind of support network of between, we're about 15 to 20. I think they cap it out at 20, and now we're at 19 members. So the WPO has been really helpful.
Well, that is fantastic. Actually, so if you're listening live, don't worry, you don't have to write this down. I'm going to put this in the podcast note, the website for the WPO as well, and we'll have a link to the Sharon's book, The Birkman Method. That link to, I know it's on Amazon for people who'd like to go out there and find more about this, as well as the website. What's the website again?
It's Birkman.com, BIRKMAN.com, and that's what I would recommend as the perfect starting point.
Well, that's easy enough. Birkman.com. To find out more about the Birkman Method or Sharon, you can go to that website. And in addition to that, on the podcast notes, there will be a link as well. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. You have a great weekend.
Thank you, Chris. You do the same.
Have a good one.
Take care.
And you have been listening to KPFT Houston.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com.
drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.